What's going on, everybody out there in Badger Nation? I hope you're off to a great start. 2020. We're now 1 month into 2020. Steven, how does that feel? We're 1/12 done into the year.
It's a little intimidating. The year's going by pretty quickly.
Zippy.
Yeah, and we got the Super Bowl coming up this weekend too, which by the time you guys are hearing the podcast, you'll already know the outcome. So no spoilers, please. We haven't seen it yet.
The Super Bowl this weekend is a great reason to start your New Year's resolutions, like on the first Monday in February, as opposed to January, because then you get like an extra month of fun. You get like November's fun. You got Thanksgiving. You got the holidays in December.
Exactly. January's a wash, anyways.
January's a wash. All the productivity coaches say January's a wash.
Just wait till February.
Wait until February. Not even February 1, but the first Monday in February.
Yeah.
Take it easy. Take it easy. You know what's not easy? This topic that we're about to talk about inside your Amazon ads account. This topic, we were trying to come up with a good name for this. And in fact, at the time that we're recording this, we still don't have a good name for it yet. So after we record it, we're really going to have to put a name on this. It's the concept in an Amazon advertising account of death by 1,000 cuts. And this is something that is likely happening in most accounts. I want to say probably all accounts. By default, this kind of thing happens. So we're going to be talking about what it means to have death by 1,000 cuts. And this was inspired, Stephen. You know, it's cool. We never have to look too hard for content ideas for the show because we're like in the world of Amazon advertising. So you were actually just auditing an account and you noticed something pretty interesting, strange, uncomfortable, sort of this death by 1,000 cuts principle. What did you see in this account that inspired this episode?
This account that we were doing an audit for, basically it was pretty obvious just from when I first glanced at it. The majority of the spend on this campaign was going to, or of this account was going to an auto campaign. And so I instantly knew that there was probably going to be some irrelevant searches likely in there. And sure enough, I got the search report and I actually just, I just set a filter on saying, show me everything with 0 conversions. And I ended up finding out that there were 12,800 search terms with no sales. A lot of them got just 1 click, and so maybe just 90 cents of total spend was the average for all of these non-converting search terms. But that added up quickly to $11,000 of wasted spend out of the $21,000 of the total spend for the account.
That's wild. That's about half the account was going towards things that didn't have a conversion. So search terms that didn't have a conversion, 12,800 search terms, no conversions on them, but individually they weren't spending that much, like just $1 or so, like an average click was coming in at about $1. But here they were adding up slowly by slow, like inch by inch, cut by cut, where death by 1,000 cuts, where 50% of this ad spend is now going towards things that haven't converted. So this problem, and hopefully it's not as severe inside your account, dear listener, but it does definitely happen. I would say this is the default. Do you have any details about like the history of that account, like how long it was running, or like how complex it was, like how many campaigns or ASINs there were in it?
I did not. Unfortunately, I wasn't given a lot of the information that was requested in order to make the campaign audit, as good as possible.
Damn. That's another story for another podcast.
Yeah. So I was definitely limited there to how much I actually had access to, which obviously limited the actual, I think, overall helpfulness of the audit itself. But it looked like they had probably about 10 products. And yeah, most of it was most of the money was being spent on broad match and auto campaigns. And I think when people are looking for negative keyword rules, it's pretty easy to get like the obvious high spenders, right? The high clicks. If you show something for like, hey, show me everything with over 50 clicks and no sales, or over $20 to spend, no sales. It's pretty easy to find the big guys, but it's these thousands of just little dudes. So for example, like one of the search terms that came through was number one dad, and they were selling products for the construction industry. So
whoa,
number one dad, construction equipment, not super relevant, but it was one impression and one click and 90 cents and seemingly small, but you get thousands of those things, and then you're pretty much done for.
Yes, and that's, if you think about the way that most people optimize their search terms, they download a search term report, and then they look through that search term report, and the first thing that people will probably do is, say, show me everything that's spent over some threshold that they don't like. So show me everything that's spent over $30, $40, $50 without a conversion. And that's how they'll work with those Excel files, and they'll take them and they'll throw them back to Amazon and say, add these as negatives. And then, that is good. Like, obviously you need to do those things. Like, that is a big part of it. Like, finding the worst offenders, the biggest, worst terms that you're showing up for. Obviously that's going to help. But then, of course, if you only do that, you are leaving a lot of room for improvement inside your campaign. So those negative keywords, sort of like super bad red light on, where something spends like $200 without a conversion. Obviously high spend, no conversion, high click, no conversion, super high impressions, very bad CTR, no conversions. Those things are relatively easy to find. But what do you do when you just have this army of individual search terms that, maybe they're relevant, maybe they're not relevant, maybe it's like the number one dad situation for a product in the construction industry, but maybe they're kind of related. Do we have to go through one by one and ask ourselves, like, is this one relevant? Is this not one relevant? I mean, in this account, you said there were almost 13,000 of them. So let's actually get into talk about this. Like, let's actually solve this problem so we can have better, more profitable accounts. So the first thing that I want to say is, if your account has a whole bunch of these things, like if it has hundreds and hundreds of them, I actually, we don't have this in the notes, Stephen, but I actually do feel like it's important to say it doesn't necessarily mean you have a super bad account. There is benefit, and we talk all the time about the benefit of having your auto campaign, of, doing these research-based activities, launching a category campaign, launching broad and phrase ad groups. Like, there's definitely value in this, and we want to do that research. And what we're talking about is we're doing that research, and you want to keep a very close eye on it and be sure that, you don't end up with a situation where 50% of your account is actually wasted and spent on things like this. So I do feel like that was an important point to make. In fact, I would say an account that has no discovery spend, like where you're not doing anything testing, you don't have any autos, you don't have any phrase or broad, you don't have any category, everything is only exact. That account is missing something. That account's missing the opportunity to go out there and find new things. So I do feel like that's important before we go into the solution. I just wanted to preface this by saying that.
Right. Yeah. And that is exactly what those auto campaigns are aiming to do. And so that's why you'll get thousands of search terms that have just one impression, one click, maybe it's 50 cent CPC. And it doesn't seem like, no one of those impressions seems like a big deal and seems like it's worth adding as a negative keyword. And that's just Amazon's way of that's their way of doing research is, they'll give you a shot at one thing that they think might be related. And if nobody clicks it, they're like, okay, that must not be relevant. And then they go on to the next thing. But when you add up these thousands of items, as we said, if any of you guys download a search report and you just filter out everything with no sales and you get a subtotal, you'll probably be shocked yourself to see, probably over half your budget didn't convert. And so our way of combating that is, first and foremost, just limit your budget on auto campaigns. And if you're doing RPSB, you should be spending the majority of your money, like probably 60-70%, maybe even 80% of your budget should be spent on manual campaigns, and preferably exact and phrase match keywords. We should not, you don't want to be spending most of your money on auto and broad, because that's for research. It's not for actual ad spend efficiency.
Exactly. So, that number should be bigger than 0. Like, you should do some research, but of course you want to keep a close eye on it. Something, 10, 15, maybe, and, depending on what stage of the PPC lifecycle you're in. I mean, when you first launch your account, 100% of your spend is going to be research-based spend. And then over time, what you want to do is you want to just monitor, like, how much is going towards autos, and is this getting smaller over time? And, conversely, your account should be getting bigger, but your actual research-based spend you should be zeroing in, ideally, as your account grows. So that's definitely something to keep in mind. So try to, the goal is to know as many searches as possible that people will make, and exact match those. Try to know as many product impressions that are going to convert, and try to ASIN target those in product targeting. Like, that's sort of how you want to think about this.
Yeah, and I actually see tons of wasted money on ASIN targets coming from auto campaigns as well. So yeah, I mean, so the way you combat getting thousands and thousands of just one impression, one-off clicks with stuff that's irrelevant, like number one dad, is by focusing on exact match keywords. Because as long as you don't have the keyword number one dad as an exact match, you won't be showing up for that in your manual campaigns.
There's some proactive stuff. Yeah, so being proactive about this, actually structuring your account in a way that facilitates more exact hits rather than more loose and wild hits. So for sure.
Right.
Yeah.
And then there is one other thing that you guys can do. This part, so that's like the easy part. That's just stick to the process, to the strategy, and you'll naturally prevent that wasted ad spend. The second one is quite a bit more work, but just going through going through those thousands of search terms, giving them a one over, and kind of manually grabbing them and adding them as negative keywords. Even though it's, one impression, one click here or there, if you can do that for all these guys, and we'll talk a little bit more about some strategies to kind of streamline that process and make it not so you're actually looking at least in our previous example of the campaign audit, like 12,800 search terms we had that weren't converting. So you obviously don't want to look at all of those. So Mike, what are some other strategies, guys, out there listening can do to, just streamline it?
Yeah, this was a strategy definitely pioneered in the days of Google Ads. I say in the days of Google Ads. Google Ads still spends more than Amazon Ads, but it was started for Google Ads. And basically what it is, it's called like an n-gram analysis, where n is a number, meaning you might have this list of 13,000 search terms, and the word dad, number one dad, maybe that gets 2 clicks. Maybe gifts for dad gets 3 clicks. And then you analyze everything, and you find 100 of these things all have the word dad in it. And the word dad, anytime it's in a search term, never converts. So what you can sort of take away from that is like, this word dad just isn't going to work for me. So you can sort of do that level of analysis that will allow you to find new phrase match negatives. So phrase match negatives will wholesale block every single search with the word dad in it, and that will allow you to just sort of, you're adding one negative keyword, you're adding a negative phrase, but you have just blocked potentially thousands of different impressions with the word dad in it, knowing that anytime this word dad shows up, it's just not going to convert for your product. And then you can start to expand that number out. Maybe sometimes the word dad converts, but then you break that out and you move on to like a 3 gram, or like gifts for dad. And then you start realizing, hey, the word dad isn't the bad culprit. It's the word gifts for dad. And then that way you can find, you can negative phrase gifts for dad and block everything with the search gifts for dad in it. So this kind of analysis and just sort of scanning through things is known as sort of like n-gram analysis. And what it allows you to do is really look through the search terms that you appeared for and look for the phrase matches. Look for the things that you can wholesale block thousands of searches at a time. So, in that list of 13,000 searches, maybe the word dad showed up a couple times. And if you found it and you analyze, you said, show me everything with the word dad in it, you'd be able to, zero in on how this word influences the search's performance. So that level of analysis is definitely something to think about. And even if you don't have any, fancy Excel spreadsheets to do this, you'll still want to scan through that. So even when you download the search term report, if you did see the word dad, you can do it as simple as just filter, show me everything that has the word dad in it, and get a good general sense of like, man, every time this thing shows up, I better block it. Add the negative phrase dad, and then boom, like that's how you can work through it. And hopefully that way you get rid of dozens and dozens of searches at a time, which definitely saves you time in the act of adding negatives, but it also prevents, future hundreds of different searches that all involve that. So yes, n-gram analysis to find some of those phrase match negatives. Definitely something I like to do.
Yeah, it's a great strategy to use. And there's one final thing that you guys can use to kind of just make this whole process faster for yourself, which is basically just getting a PPC tool. They're out there. I know of one in particular that is helpful.
Yeah.
But these tools, what they'll let you do is you'll basically just it'll show you your own search term report, and you throw your own threshold on there and say, just show me everything without a conversion. You can sort from like highest clicks or lowest clicks, whatever. And you go through and you just check, and just like add a little checkbox. Just click every search term that you want to block. And then you can choose, do you want to add all these as negative exact, negative phrase? Do you want to add these at the ad group level, at the campaign level, or we even have the option, the account level, which is basically if a negative keyword at the ad group level blocks, that ad group from appearing for that search term. At the campaign level, it applies it to all of the ad groups in that campaign. So none of those ad groups will appear for that search if there's a negative keyword. And we added the account level, which basically just applies it at the campaign level for every single campaign in the account. But yeah, you can just click, and then just apply it to all your campaigns. And it's it's much faster than having to download a bulk sheet if you're trying to do it that way. You have to grab the campaign ID. It's a pain.
Mm-hmm. So we always aim to keep our show very, very pitch free. But if anyone is an Ad Badger customer listening to the show, use the negative keyword, daily automation to find all the big bad offenders. Like set the threshold for your daily automation very high, like $30 in spend without a conversion. And then periodically you'll want to go in and sort of like quickly go through, then you say, show me everything with over one click. And then you just click, add these as, negative exact. And then hopefully you find some of those negative phrases in there, and boom, you can block thousands of things at a time. So this process, in general, this sort of death by 1,000 cuts, all these rogue clicks that are just sort of stealing like $1 at a time, on one hand, it's great research. Like you're getting loads and loads of data, and you do want to be thoughtful when you go through here, because some of these may end up being really strong converters for you. If you find something in there that only had a few dollars of spend, but is relevant and is similar to other words that do convert, those things you're going to want to give a little bit more time to mature. However, when you find the irrelevant things that are just not going to convert, that's where you go in and you just sort of slice and dice. You get these things out of the way. You attack it instead of having it attack you. So that's definitely something to keep in mind as you go through this. It doesn't necessarily mean your account is awful if you have this in your present in it. It just means your research has turned way too up, and you need to sort of get that under control. So that is sort of the death by 1,000 cuts, out of control search term. This was a shorter episode, Stephen, but this is pretty important in the sense of like, I know we look at so many accounts. I know this is happening. So this, this happens in auto campaigns, and this also can happen when people do keyword dumping. I didn't even think of that when we were preparing our notes. If somebody dumps in like 50 phrase matches at a time or 50 broads at a time, those are going to go out there and find hundreds and thousands of search terms that are all getting clicks. So like 50 times, if every single one gets 50, different search term clicks, that's 50 times 50. That's like a lot of clicks that are going to be coming in for all these wild things.
Yeah. So, guys, don't die by 1,000 cuts. Instead, go get 1,000 Band-Aids and patch up your account.
Fun fact for those who stuck around until the end of the show, death by 1,000 cuts, traditionally known as Ling Chi, which in medieval speech is what they called this process. So not to get too morbid at the end of the show, but
it was an ancient torture system.
Yes, don't look up the history of death by 1,000 cuts. We were like, what else could we name this episode so that we don't have to say death by 1,000 cuts? But lo and behold, here we are. Have a good one, everyone. We will see you next time.
My AirPods are not charged, so they're dying one at a time. So I'm trying to switch one out to charge it.
Oh my God.
We're good. We're here. All right.